Masechet Baba Batra, Daf, Kof Lamed Gimel. We are discussing the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, who says that if someone is on his deathbed, then he is allowed to redistribute his inheritance among people who can inherit him. So if he says, listen, I have 3 sons, I just decided, you know what, I want my youngest son to get all the money. That's what he says. Or he wants his daughter to get instead of his sons, and so on. He's permitted to do that, as long as it's someone who is in line to inherit. And so regarding that, we have a ruling Amar Rav Huna, Shechib mena shekatav kol nechasav la'acher, ro'in, im ra'ui le'yorsho notlan mishum yerusha, v'im lav notlan mishum matana. Rav Huna says, if someone is on his deathbed, it's important here that be on his deathbed. We discussed before that Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka's ruling can in fact perhaps apply even if someone is healthy. But anyway, here it has to be on his deathbed, because if someone's on his deathbed, not only can he declare what his will is regarding those who inherit him, he also can give a gift, even without a formal transaction, just by saying, I want this piece of land to go to that my friend over there, then it gets transferred, even though there's no formal act. So he says that he wants all of his property to go to a certain individual. Well, now, how is it going to work? Is it going to be a gift or an inheritance? So he says it depends. We see if this person is in line to inherit him, his son, his grandson, someone who would be in somewhere in the line, then it's considered an inheritance. But if not, if it's just a friend who's not related to him, then that person will receive it as a gift. Okay, clear enough. Aman le Rav Nachman, Ganaba ganube lamalach. Rav Nachman tells Rav Huna, why are you stealing? What does it mean, stealing? I sebira lach kerebi Yochanan ben Beroka, ema halacha kerebi Yochanan ben Beroka, daha shema'tetich Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka hu de'azla. He's not literally stealing. He means, why are you acting like a thief? That you're saying something in a roundabout way, and are you trying to hide something? If you want to say, if you think that the halacha follows Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, so say so, right? Admit to your opinion and say a simple statement, halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, because after all, your ruling over here assumes that you follow Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. Where do we see that it assumes that? Because he says, if someone is in line to inherit him, even though he's not the direct person, let's say it's not his son, or he's giving it to his daughter, or to a grandchild instead. So that's only valid according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. And he says, well, if it's someone in line, then it goes to that person as an inheritance. That assumes the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. So Rav Nachman is accusing Rav Huna of trying to rule like Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, but hiding it in the details of a law. Remember, we did see that Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka is a minority opinion, although not at all. We already saw several statements that said halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, but still, maybe you have to kind of hide this fact, and so why not say it out loud? Be proud of it if that's really what you think, and also just say it simply, halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. Why do you have to say it in such a complicated way? Are you trying to hide something? And he answers, Dilma ki ha ka'amar. So Rav Nachman gives Rav Huna, of course, the benefit of the doubt. So maybe this is what you were saying. He's reconstructing the context. Dahu da'avaka shachib. V'amarule nichse leman dilma leplanya v'amarlehu ela leman v'amatla adlan ala. Im ra'ui le'yosho notam bishum yerusha. V'im lav notam bishum matana. Amarle'in hachi ka'amina. And so Rav Nachman says, perhaps this is what happened, that there was an actual case of someone who was dying. And he didn't say any will, he didn't say what he wanted, so the people around him asked him, all right, who do you want to leave your property to? Is it to Mr. Friedman? I guess they know that he is very close to this person, maybe he's a good friend or whatever, or maybe a relative. So they ask him, is it that you want to give it to Mr. Friedman here? And so the guy on his deathbed said, well, who else? Like rhetorically, of course I do. I didn't have to say it. You could figure it out. And then Rav Nachman is telling Rav Huna, and then you said about that case, well, how is it going to work? Inheritance or a gift? He said, check into it. If this Mr. Friedman is in line somewhere to inherit him, then it takes it as an inheritance. Maybe he's a brother or whatever. But if not, if he's not related at all, no way that he could inherit, then he would get it as a gift. So is that what happened? That this case came before you, and that's why you formulated it in this way, because it would not be sufficient to just say halacha k'Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, because the question is how to apply it in this particular case. So Rav Huna was not trying to hide anything. He would be happy to say, if he was giving a general ruling, halacha k'Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. But here he formulated it in such a way to apply to this particular case. And so is that what happened? And Rav Huna says, yes, exactly. That's exactly what I was saying. There was a case just like this, and I had to clarify if it is someone who can inherit, then you can apply it to Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. But if not, then he cannot inherit because he's not in line inheritance. Then it has to be a gift. Now we ask, what would be the practical difference whether this Mr. Friedman that got this item, whether it was as a gift or as inheritance? Either way, he's getting the property. Almanato nizonet minechasav, ve'im lav, and almanato nizonet minechasav. So at first, Ravada bar Ahava, who said this before Rava, he presented the following hypothesis. Perhaps the difference is that if it's a person in line to inherit, so now it's an inheritance, then the widow of the guy who died can get sustenance from the property. And if he's not in line and it's a gift, then the widow cannot receive sustenance from the property. Some background here. When someone dies, and if he's married, so his estate has to pay a ketubah. She would get the ketubah no matter what, whether it's an inheritance or a gift, because she has a lien on all of his property going back to the beginning of the marriage. And so whether he sold this property or gave it as a gift or it's inherited by others, she gets a right to take it. So we're not talking about the ketuvah payout. We're talking about something else. A widow, let's say she says, listen, I don't need the money right now, the full lump sum ketuvah payout. I don't want it right now. I just want to be sustained by the estate. She has a right to do so. She can stay in the house and be sustained by the inheritance, or whoever's inheriting it. It could be her sons, it could be his sons from a different marriage. So that's what we're talking about. This, she doesn't have a lien on the estate in order to get this. Only if the estate goes to inheritors, then it's built in that the inheritors have to take care, the estate has to take care of her. So she has a right to be sustained from an estate that's inherited. But if the husband gives it away as a gift while he's alive, then the gift receiver has no responsibility at all to provide for her sustenance. She could get a lump sum of her ketubah payment because that's owed to her and she has a lien on the land for that. So that would be a practical difference between the two things. If he is a relative, then that relative will have to sustain her. If he's not a relative and it's a gift, then he does not have to sustain her. That's what Ravada bar Ahava was thinking. Amar le Rava migra gara, but he presented this to Rava, and Rava said, is her right diminished? I mean, it doesn't make sense. Why? Hashta birusha deoraita amarat almanato nizonet minechasav b'matana derabanan lo kol sheken. If you think that regarding an inheritance which is on a deoraita level, you say that the widow gets sustenance from the property, that is what we just said, everybody agrees, then in a gift that's only derabanan, all the more so. Now this gift here is a derabanan type of gift. Normally, if I give you a gift and we make a formal transaction, then that goes to you mideoraita. But here, the law of a shechiv mera, the law that someone on his deathbed can just say words and then the item transfers, that's a takana miderabanan. The rabbis wanted the person who's dying for his mind to be at ease. And he's thinking about, what about this property and that property? I have to get a lawyer, I have to go do a thing. I have to get a kinyan chelipin. Where's that guy? We want him to be at ease. So he's weak. Let him just say, this thing I want to go to that person. And so this is a gift, but it only works on the Rabbanan level. So therefore, Rava is saying it doesn't make sense that for an inheritance, which is a deoraita law, if it goes to sons or whoever is going to inherit, then the widow gets sustained. But a drabanan gift can override that, and then the widow won't get sustained. No, that doesn't make sense. And therefore, Rava argues that whether it's an inheritance or a gift, even the gift receiver will have to sustain the widow, because although it is as a gift, but it's only the Rabbanan gift. So we have to be stringent upon him and say, listen, if it was an inheritance, she would get it. So you're still going to have to pay this. So therefore, that cannot be the practical difference between the two. Ela amarava, kideshalach Rav Acha bar Rav Avya, ledivre Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, nechasai lecha v'acharecha lifloni, im haya rishon ra'oi liyorsho, en lashini b'makom rishon kelum, she'en lashon matana ela lashon yerusha, v'yerusha en la hefsek. Rather, Rava said, here is a practical difference. It is using the law that Rav Acha bar Avya sent. We already saw this quoted up earlier. According to who says, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, if someone is dying and he says, I'm going to give my property to Mr. A, and after A, it should go to B. In other words, when I'm giving it to you, Mr. A, and after Mr. A dies, it shouldn't go to A's sons or normal inheritors. I want it as a condition. I want it then to be taken away from A and A's line and be given to someone completely different, not related to Mr. B. So does that work? Does that happen? According to this ruling, no, it does not. If the Mr. A has inheritors, let's say he has sons, then it goes to the sons of Mr. A, and Mr. B does not get anything from it. That's if it's an inheritance. Because this formulation is not a language of a gift, but rather a language of an inheritance. And an inheritance has no end, no stopping point, meaning as follows. If he said, this is a gift, I'm giving this to you as a matana, and after you have it, Mr. A, I want it to go to Mr. B. So in that case, it would work. I can give a gift on condition. Here, I'm giving you this gift. You use it on condition that you use it your whole life. After you die, it's not going to be inherited by your inheritors. It's going to go to Mr. B. That would be valid if you explicitly said it was a gift. But if you use this kind of language, this type of language is an inheritance. And once I bequeath something to you, then that's it. That's the final end. There's no end to that inheritance. Means it goes to Mr. A, and then when he dies, to his children or whoever inherits him, as long as he has some relative who can inherit him. And therefore, Rava says that would be the difference that would be a nafkamina between the two situations. This guy on his deathbed that we started with, that Ravuna was dealing with. And he says, I'm going to give it to Mr. Friedman. If that Mr. Friedman is a relative who could inherit the guy who's dying, then it would be an inheritance. So that if the guy on the deathbed said, I'm going to give it to Mr. Friedman, when he dies, I want it to go to Mr. B, then it would not go to Mr. B. It would go to Mr. Friedman, and then it would go to his sons, whoever inherits him. But if Mr. Friedman is not related to the guy on his deathbed, and he uses the same language, and he says, I want to go to Mr. Friedman and then to Mr. B, then when Mr. Friedman dies, it does in fact go to Mr. B, because there it's a gift. And so that is a practical difference between them. So that's what Rava said. Rava himself asks a question. Amar le Rava le Rav Nachman veha afseka. Rava asked Rav Nachman, wait a second, about what I just said, but doesn't it end? Because he said, I want to go to you until you die. And then that's it. Then it goes to someone else. So that means he put a condition on it. So if the condition, is not going to be fulfilled, then maybe it's not even a bequeathment at all in the first place. And the answer is, no, the bequeathing still goes on, even though the guy in his deathbed thought that it can stop. He can bequeath it to this Mr. A, and then he can make it stop when he dies, and then go to Mr. B. That's what he thought could happen. But the Torah says otherwise. Hashem said, no, once you bequeath it, then it goes to that person, and you cannot get it back, and it doesn't matter if you made a condition. We ignore the condition, and the inheritance stands. And so, in fact, this is a good nafka mina between whether the person that he leaves it to is a relative who's in line to inherit or not. that. Hahud amar lechavre nechasai lecha v'acharecha leploni v'rishon ra'ui leyorsho hava shechib rishon ata sheni kataba. And now we have an actual case of someone who told his friend, I want to give all my property to you, Mr. A. And after you die, I want it to go to Mr. B. And the first Mr. A is in line to inherit the guy who is dying. That's the case. And sure enough, so this guy on his deathbed died. It went to Mr. A. Mr. A eventually died. Mr. B comes to court and says, oh, the guy, original guy said, I get it next, so I should have it. But Mr. A has inheritors. He has sons who say, no, it was our father's. We inherited. So what happens? Sabar Rav Elish kamed Rav Lememar sheni name shakil. And so Rav Elish was analyzing this case in front of his teacher Rava, and he hypothesized as follows. He said, well, you see, it's not clear whether Mr. A, now that he died, maybe he should stay with him and his line and sons get it, or maybe Mr. B should get it because that was the original condition. So he thought to say, let's give part of it to Mr. B. Let's divide it half-half, and that way, everybody will be equally happy or equally unhappy. So that's what Rav Elish was going to do. But Rava corrected him. Amar le dayane de chasasta hachi daini lav hainu de shalach ravacha bar Rav Avya. And so Rava told Rav Elish, this is what compromise judges do. There's some judges that they don't like to decide anything and say you're right and you're wrong. You have to pay the total amount and you don't have to pay anything. They're always like, well, you have a point, you have a good point. And so whenever a case comes to them, they're always like, okay, you compromise, pay half, you'll lose half, he'll lose half, it's okay. And they like to make, they're supposedly shalom, but they don't want to just say the law. And sometimes that's a good idea, but when both sides do have some fault or whatever, but not in this case, because Rava says, don't you know what Rav Acha, Bar Rav Avya, the halacha that he sent? He sent a clear ruling that according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, when someone inherits and they have a condition like this, then we ignore the condition. If he says, I want to go to Mr. A, and then after he dies to Mr. B, then it goes to Mr. A and all of his inheritors. Once it's an inheritance, we ignore the condition. As a gift, yes, as a gift you can say, I give this to you as a gift on condition that after you die, it goes to the other guy. But as an inheritance is final sale. And so don't you know that? Ichsif, Rav Elish was embarrassed. Says, oh yeah, you're right. I forgot about that. I didn't take into account. And that's why I made a compromise, because I wasn't sure if he's right or he's right. And now Rav Elish was embarrassed now that he was corrected. Kari aleh, ani Hashem be'ita achi shenna. But Rava comforted him and quoted him the pasuk in Yeshaya that says, I, Hashem, will hasten it in his time. Yeshaya is talking about the redemption, right? I'll bring it, right? When it comes, it'll come quickly. But here he's applying it too. Don't worry, Rav Elish. Hashem sent me here to make sure to correct you. So that you almost made a mistake, but almost doesn't count. And so it must be by divine providence that I'm here and I was able to discuss it with you and point out this mistake. So don't be embarrassed. It's actually a good sign. It means Hashem cares to keep you from an error. Okay, beautiful story. And now next Mishnah. HaKoteb et nechasav la'acherim v'haniach et banav ma she'asa asui ela en ruach hachamim nocha hemenu. We have Tanakama here that says, if someone writes a will and he writes all of his property to someone else and he leaves out his sons, he disinherits his sons, that is valid. He can do that, but the rabbis are not pleased with him. It's not a nice thing to do. Yes, legally he can do such a thing, but the rabbis say, no, don't do it, and they would advise people not to do such a thing. It's not nice to disinherit your sons. That's Tanakama. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer, im lo hayu banav nohagim kashura, zachu latov. However, Rashbag says, if the children were not acting correctly, they were lowlives and didn't deserve to get an inheritance, and the father wanted to punish them and send a message by disinheriting them, then we remember that guy positively. We say, praiseworthy is that person who disinherits disinherited such low-life sons. Okay, very interesting. Mishnah. Question. Ibayalehu. Mi peligi Rabbanan le Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel or la? Is there a machloket here? Does Rashbag disagree with Tanakama? He's presented in a way that it looks like a machloket. Like Tanakama says it's no good, and Rashbag says if they're low lives, then it's a good thing to do. So is there a disagreement? And Tanakama would say, no matter what, you should always love your sons, always keep them in the inheritance, even if they act like low lives, but nevertheless always keep them in. All right, this is a good question in modern psychology and parenting. Right, is there a point, or at what point should parents withhold their love or withhold their inheritance? Some people say love them unconditionally, even if they do something terrible. You have to love them no matter what. So is that what Tanakama says? And Rashbag says no. If they're low lives, then disinherit them. Is there a machloket here? Or maybe Rashbag is just qualifying the Tanakama and explaining, and maybe that everybody would be in agreement. Tanakama is talking about a case where the kids are good, and Rashbag is talking about a case where the kids are bad, but there's no machloket. That is what we want to try to figure out. So we're going to try to answer based on a fascinating story. Tashema. To Yosef ben Yoezer, haya lo ben, shelo haya noheg kashura. We have Yosef, or Yosef ben Yoezer, as he's also known. He is one of the Zugot, mentioned in Pirkei Avot. So lived during the time of the second Bet HaMikdash. And he had a son who did not act properly. Hava le'iliyata de dinare kam akadisha. And Yosef ben Yoezer, he had a vessel full of coins, very wealthy, and he did not want to leave it to his son because his son was not acting properly. So instead he says, I'm donating it to the Bet HaMikdash. This is consecrated, and that way this wayward son won't get anything. In the meantime, Azil Nesiba Bat Gadel Kalile Yanai Malka. This wayward son went and married the daughter of King Yanai's crown weaver. King Yanai, one of the Hasmonean kings. Alexander Yanai, who was not such a great person, in fact, quite an evil person. Anyway, he married not the king's daughter, but the daughter of the king's crown weaver. Olida debitu, and she had a child. They had a child together. Zebin la binita, and he, to celebrate the fact that he just had a child, with his wife, he bought a fish. Kera'a ashkach ba margalita. And as he opened up the fish, he found a pearl inside. This fish had swallowed a pearl, maybe from some treasure that somebody dropped at some point, and now he's very wealthy. So Amrale, his wife, who was very wise and knew about financial matters, gave him some good advice. La tamteya le malka. Do not bring it to the treasure. They want to sell it because they don't need the pearl, they want the money. And so he says, listen, don't bring it to the treasury of the king to sell. Teshakle la minach bidme kalile, because they'll give you a bad price. This is the king after all, and so he could, basically just take anything he wants. So maybe it's worth, $10 million. He'll say, oh, this pearl, oh, it's worth $1 million. He'll give you a bad price, and you're not gonna have a choice. You're just gonna have to sell it at whatever price he says. So don't do it. Don't give it there. Zil amtiya legabe gizbare. Rather, bring it to the temple treasurers. The treasurers in the Bet HaMikdash, they are more fair in their appraisals. Vela teshai ma'at da'amirato lagaboa kemesirato lahejot ela leshaimuha inhu. And this wife, she knows her halacha also. And she says, when you bring it to the temple treasurer, don't offer an appraisal yourself. If you go there and you say, hey, do you want to, buy this pearl that's worth, I think it's worth $5 million. So once you say that, then you're going to have to give them $5 million and sell it at that price, because she knows that the halacha is that saying something regarding gavoa is like handing it over to a regular person. In other words, for a regular person, it's not yours until we make a transaction. Until I actually give over an item or do some formal transaction, it's not yours. I can renege on the deal. But if I just say I want to consecrate this item, just talking, just saying it, it becomes the possession, the ownership of the temple treasurer. treasury, even though I didn't give it over. So therefore, if you come and say, I want to donate this thing that I think is worth $5 million, then that's it. You already gave it over. Rather, ela l'shaimu ha'inhu, just say, hey, I'm thinking of donating this item. How much do you think it's worth? And then they'll give you a price that they think, and that will be a fair price. So he in fact brought it to the temple treasury, and they said, this pearl, wow, this is worth 13 vessels full of dinarim. It's 13 times more valuable than the wealth of the father, Yosef ben Yoezer. So temple treasury said, listen, this pearl is worth more than our entire deposits here that we are holding in the Bet HaMikdash. We have 7 vessels full of coins, but we don't have 13. We're missing 6. So what do you want to do? Amar lehu sheba habuli shitarehen mukadashot lashamayim. And the son says, okay, I'll take what I can get. Give me all 7 vessels full of coins that you have, and the other 6, I will make that consecrated to heaven. That'll be a donation. And so he gives them the pearls, and then he walks away with all of the storage of coins of the temple treasury. Amdu vechatvu. Yosef ben Yoezer ichnis achat, ubeno ichnis shesh. And so the treasurer then wrote down in some ledger that they had, Yosef ben Yoezer, he donated 1 vessel full of these gold coins, and his son brought 6. According to this formulation, it seems that it was praiseworthy what the father did. And they're making a connection. It's not just that like the son is better that he donated more. It's more that because Yosef ben Yoezer donated to the Bet HaMikdash rather than gave it to his son, that's why the son got the message. Oh, my father is not happy with me. Look how he disinherited me. Why did he do that? Oh, because I did all these terrible things. I changed my ways. And now that he changed his ways, so he's worthy of praise. And see, he donated 6, even surpassing his father. According to that, it's good to disinherit a wayward son to teach him a lesson, and then he'll make teshuvah. However, there's another version. Yosef ben Yoezer ichnis achat ubeno hosi sheva. The other version is that they wrote down in the ledger because Yosef ben Yoezer donated 1 vessel full of gold coins and didn't give it to his son. You know what happened? His son remained an evil person. And look how bad he is. He removed 7 vessels of gold coins from the Bet HaMikdash. Now, even though technically he gave them something worth 13, nevertheless, the second formulation is focusing on the negative, the fact that he took 7 and emptied out all the coffers of the Bet HaMikdash, which he shouldn't have done, even though in the end it's net positive for the Bet HaMikdash, but to empty him that totally shows what kind of person he is. Like he would take, if he could, he would take all 13 and not donate anything. It's just that, he has a pearl that no one, who else has enough wealth that they could pay out such a sum. So the king, if he went to the king would value it as much less. And so he tried to rob the Bet HaMikdash of everything, not literally robbed. I mean, he gave them something and they agreed to it, but nevertheless, the point is he wasn't being generous. He was trying to take as much as he wanted. You know why? Because his father disinherited him, so he remained on a bad way. Instead, his father should have showed love and gave him inheritance. He would have said, oh, look how much my father loves me. I should really follow in his ways. And maybe then he would make teshuvah. And so this is exactly what we say now. So according to the first version, because it says that, look, the son donated 6. So that means that it was good that the father disinherited him so that the son learned his lesson. Look how he donated such a nice amount. So that, therefore, we should learn that according to Tanakama would agree that it's good to disinherit a wayward son. No, but there's another version. Maybe they wrote in the temple treasury that, look, because the father gave money and disinherited his son. Now the son came and emptied out the coffers. He would have taken even more if he could. And look at how he stayed wayward. And therefore, that would mean that Tanakama would disagree with Rashbag and say, no, even if a son is wayward, do not disinherit him. And look, see, he disinherited him in this case, and he remained wayward. Rather, he should give the inheritance no matter what, unconditional love. And that's the best way to hope that the son will make teshuvah. So since there's two versions of what they wrote down in the ledger, and they lead to opposite conclusions, in the end, we cannot prove one way or another from that story. So we'll try again. Mai havi Allah. So which way do we say? Should we say halacha is like Rashbag, and Tanakama would agree with Rashbag, or he would differ? Tashema damad leShemuel lerav Yehuda shinena la teve be'abore achsanta ve'afilu mibara bisha lebarata ba ve'kol sheken mibara librata. We can learn it from the following statement where Shemuel tells his student Rav Yehuda, sharp one. Rav Yehuda was very sharp, so that was his nickname. Do not be in a house. Be is a house where avure, where they transfer achsanta, inheritance. Don't be involved in any case where a father says before he dies, I want to give my property instead of to the normal inheritance, I want to give it to someone else. Don't be involved, even though technically he has a right to do so according to Yochanan ben Beroka, or that we understand, but it's not good to be involved. And even if the father is transferring it from a wayward son to a good son, don't be involved. And all the more so if he wants to take away from his son and give it to a daughter. So for our purpose, this line is the key, that even though he's taking it away from a wicked son and giving it to a good son, and technically he has permission to do that, nevertheless, don't be involved, don't be in the house when that happens. So we see that Shemuel was not favorable, even if it was disinheriting an evil son. And therefore we can conclude that Tanakama disagreed with Rashbag. Rashbag was an individual opinion that says it's good to inherit a wayward son. Tanakama disagreed. Tanakama said, although anyone's permitted to disinherit a son, the rabbis are not pleased. We see here Shemuel is teaching Rav Yehuda, you should not be pleased with a father disinheriting a son, even if it's a wayward son. So we learn here a principle of unconditional love of parents to their children. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.